Hi, I'm Melinda Kucsera, and we're back with another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. Today, we've got Ben Spencer, and he's here to talk about Many Savage Moons. I've got questions, he's got answers, so let's meet Ben, and let's find out about Many Savage Moons. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Melinda. Thank you for having me today. And I'm here to talk about my book, Many Savage Moons. It is a genre bending work of fiction, a mix of fantasy and literature. It's about two people who meet, fall in love on a first date, but the woman is actually the captive of a writer who holds her captive by whenever he touches her, whenever he writes at night, she dreams whatever he writes. And if he writes something that is dangerous or violent, she can die in those dreams. And he does this to many different people. So the romance between these two people who meet is doomed from the get-go. In the books, that's the starting point from the book, and then we jump off from there.
Oh, wow. We're going to find out why he does this. Is that like let's get
Yeah.
into it, and then I have lots of questions.
All right, sounds good. So I'm going to read an excerpt from the book. I'm going to read two different excerpts. The first one is going to be the first couple of pages of the book, just introduces Winter and Nathaniel, the two main characters, how they meet. And then I'm going to jump a little bit later in the book, and I'll preface that beforehand. And we're going to read one of the dream sequences in the book when they're actually experiencing what the writer is writing as he writes it. So here we go. Many Savage Moons. She looked like Gothic architecture, like a 90s indie movie, like The Night After Christmas. He had spotted her in the bookstore and considered approaching, but she was leafing through Birds of America, and he was embarrassed that he hadn't read Lori Moore's work. But now here she stood, one of the front of the mall folk, smoking a cigarette. He angled her way, the swirling smoke from her cigarette beckoning him closer like witches' fingers. Tasty in the nostrils. She saw him and bit. "What do you want?" "A smoke?" he chanced, eyes moon pie wide. "No." She asked a nuclear winter. Spotted the border's plastic. "Not unless. What's in the bag?" "Shalimar the clown. Rusty." She eyed him, a sprite's mischief therein. "Trade you, straight up." Fuck, he thought. He loved Rusty, and $16 was $16. Still, the thought of where a grand gesture might lead intrigued him, so he handed over the goods. "All right," he said, "but I'm issuing a fatwa on you to get it back." She laughed, surrendered to camel light. The twining ivy of her neck tattoo showed as she leaned in with the lighter, the plant ravenous, wanting to strangle. Black hair, possibly dyed, flowed like the river Styx. Pearlescent skin. She wore jeans surprisingly free of holes and a thin, cheese rind red jacket over a sloganed black t-shirt. Nathaniel couldn't read the words. "What's your name?" She leaned into the next inhalation, sending the smoke into the catacombs of her lungs. "Winter," she said as the smoke rolled out, fog on a glassy sea. "Winter York. And you?" "Nathaniel Pilot." She cocked an eyebrow. "Pilot?" "Like the light, not the guy flying the plane." She grinned, peered at him through mail-slot eyelids. Took another drag. Ashed a flurry. "Okay then, what do you want? A drink? My phone number?" "Your phone number, but that's only because I'm going to need a book review when you're done," he said, nodding at the bag in her possession. He thought she meant to laugh, but her eyes snagged on someone in the far parking lot. He followed her line of vision, found a linebacker waiting, sandy blonde hair atop a Lego brick body and closing fast. He dropped her cigarette, now all cherry, and stamped it out. She dropped her cigarette, now all cherry, and stamped it out. "How about we fast forward to a date? Are you parked nearby?" He pointed to a blue Civic in a second row spot to their right, readily accessible. "Okay," she said, nervy. "Let's go." So that's the beginning of the book, and it shows them meeting each other, and then we've got the writer in the background who she's trying to avoid. So now I'm going to jump further, a bit deeper into the book, and we're going to read one of the first dream sequences. This is when Nathaniel's been touched by the writer too, so it's his first time experiencing a dream in this world, and here's what happens. He was on a boat, the upper deck of a cruise ship. Salty ribbons of late evening wind streamed through his hair, cleared his nasal passage. He had a glass of champagne in his hand. The champagne was the color of an ancient exotic currency. An inoffensive pop song piped out of unseen sound speakers. It was the sort of parasitic song that loved to worm its way into people's brains and feast, but at the present moment it sounded innocuous enough. His elbows were propped on the railing. He was waiting on a woman, his lover, but there was no rush. They were on vacation and they had all the time in the world. He was meant to be enjoying himself. He was enjoying himself. It was hard to tell the difference. Footsteps approached. He cast a glance over his shoulder and saw his lover approaching. She was wearing a breezy summer dress, blue seersucker, and long golden earrings, a shade darker than her feathery blonde hair. He noticed a gold necklace too, one that he had never seen before. He couldn't discern the pendant. My Zadie, he cooed as she drew near. The name was wrong, he knew. Her real name was Emily Winch, but here on the boat she was Zadie. A part of his mind was at odds with itself, at odds with this present reality, but the reality was unbending, wedded to this dimension. The world's undertow urged him to let go, and so he did. He pushed away from the railing and reached out to embrace his Zadie. But 5 feet away from him, she stopped. She stared at him wearing the devil's grin, a wicked, smiling scythe. Nate, she said, there's something I need to tell you. While he considered the slight change to his name, she reached up and rubbed the necklace at her collarbone with 2 fingers. The new angle made it possible for him to identify the pendant, a golden moon. In an instant, the gloaming changed over to the night. It seemed that Zadie was summoning a vast and terrible evil. She chanted a name that he couldn't place. Her face was trembling, eyes and lips aquiver like jello molds. Nathaniel looked at her with a growing horror, wondering if she was possessed. Elsewhere on the ship, people were murmuring in fear. Fingers pointed at the sky. High above, the moon was changing color. The monochromatic gray was giving way to a deep oceanic blue, the ovoid filling up like a cup. He glanced at the sky, but only for a moment. Zadie's countenance still held sway. At last, she finished her thought. I've fallen in love with someone else. There was a thud on the bow of the ship, like the hand of God, followed by a shrill screaming. Nathaniel struggled to stay upright as the bow dipped below horizontal. He dropped the champagne. Zadie laughed, a witch's cackle, but Nathaniel thought he saw fear in her eyes, fear held captive behind a character's mask. He broke eye contact with her and looked to the front of the boat. By the light of the aquamarine moon, he saw the blue and orange tentacle of a massive cephalopod gripping at the deck. He ran toward the action and not away from it, some heroic suicidal impulse winning out. While the masses struggled toward him, fighting gravity, Nathaniel sprinted downhill, toward those holding on for dear life to the deck railing nearest the tentacle. Stock photo people, but their screams were real enough. He honed in on a young couple, concocted a plan, some impossible daring do that involved leading the couple hand over hand up the portside railing until they were safe. But then another of the Leviathan's tentacles emerged from the sea and laid claim to the deck, and the world went vertiginous. His feet lost purchase with the deck. He tumbled and slid toward the sea beast. He crashed into the railing at a terrifying velocity. His arms and legs reacted on instinct, wrapping tight around the metal cylinders that were his only safeguard from the monster below. All sound was apocalyptic. The screams of the ship's passengers, the moaning ache of the boat, the hellish sucking sound of the octopus. Nearby, the young couple that he had intended to save lost their fight with gravity. They fell like angels into the bestial void. Once Nathaniel's eyes were fixed on the monster, he couldn't look away. The octopus was a shape-shifting, amorphous thing. The ocean obscured and then revealed its blobby form to disturbing effect, like a dark wizard conjuring glimpses of a nightmarish dimension. The sight of it lanced Nathaniel's soul. Yet another tentacle gained hold, causing the ship to surrender additional degrees to the vertical plane. Passengers everywhere plummeted to their deaths. Nathaniel wondered if Zadie would fall past him, but she never did. His grip began to slip. His mind, which minutes ago had acquiesced to the reality of this world, fought savagely against the notion of his impending death. He didn't want to die, and yet he knew that if he fell, death would swallow him whole. This is a dream, he told himself, trying desperately to wake up, but no matter how hard he willed it, nothing changed. The octopus, with the ship now fixed in its tentacles, began pulling the liner down into the briny depths. Nathaniel realized that his ever-weakening hold would soon be a moot point. He would die whether he held on or not. His will was faltering. He considered letting go. But then, overhead, a shadow crossed the aquamarine moon. Salvation. At first, he couldn't process what he was seeing. A blur of obsidian black feathers. A long steel blade. Was it a bird? A person? The flying creature swooped down to the deck railing and, raising the sword, revealed the face of a woman framed by raven black hair. He recognized her. From where, he wasn't sure, but he knew that he knew her. From some other world, from some other life. The answer came to him in a cold rush. The woman with the wings was Winter. Winter struck the blow and severed the tentacle. The giant octopus recoiled in agony, causing the stern of the ship to drop. Nathaniel lost his hold on the railing and his view of Winter. He tumbled back onto the ship, looked to the sky. And I'm going to stop there. That scene goes on, but that gives a good sense of what the dreamlight world is like.
Oh, that's really interesting. All right, so we've got all right, so the Nathaniel and the writer aren't the same person.
No. So the writer is James Breach. He comes in a little bit later in that scene. He appears on the boat, but yeah, he's sort of the puppet master behind the dream sequences.
I see, I see. And so I guess at some point in the is it did he meet both of them in the novel, or did they meet before the novel?
So he had already met Winter before the novel, but she thought he was out of her life and she was past that part. But then whenever she meets Nathaniel, the writer kind of is stalking her. He's trying to write her back into books again. And so he encounters them on their first date and touches both of them. And then she knows that both of their lives are in danger. And she's trying to explain this to Nathaniel, but of course, it's hard to explain that a crazy writer god can write you into dreams where you can die. And then that's his first time experiencing is that dream sequence right there.
I see. I see. No, that's wild. All right, so the writer is a god, or are they real people, or are they just characters
Yeah,
in
I mean,
his drama?
he's got this strange power. I mean, they're all real life characters, and then he also the writer does write himself into the books. He's sort of a bad guy that shows up in the dream sequences, but he becomes very popular in the real world setting through his books. But then he destroys many people's lives by writing them into dreams, and he feels like they're his muses, and he can't really, experience the creative dynamism that he needs to unless he touches people and actually like can write these people into books. So he tried doing it without touching people for a while. That's where he had sort of let Winter
Yeah.
go. But then he feels like, oh, she's my muse. I have to have her back. So
Poor Winter, man. She
yeah,
can't get away.
it's a bad situation.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't sound like a healthy relationship.
Yeah, she tried, the whole first part of the book is that initial date with Nathaniel. It's them falling in love, but then her trying to save him once she realized the danger that he's in.
Mhm.
And eventually they go their separate ways. And then later in the book, about 10 years later, Nathaniel runs into her again and he tries to think of a way to save her from her predicament. So sort of lost lovers, trying to help each other out later, and then both of their lives have changed quite a lot. And then the writer has been writing the book. He's written this series of books, and he's on the last one by the time they meet each other again 10 years later. And she's always been the heroine.
Oh, wow. So what role is Nathaniel gonna play then in that in that writer's book if she's the
Yeah, that's
hero?
so actually, without giving too many spoilers away, there's a lot of tattoo imagery in the book. I'm a
Mhm.
big fan of tattoos. Actually, I've got my writer's tattoo right here. We got the writer's pen that turns into a tree, and the tattoo and on their first date, they go to a tattoo parlor together, and he ends up getting a tattoo of a moon. That ends up playing a big role in the books and in the dreams, and I won't give away more than that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. This is all right. So there's scenes that are in the real world, and then there's these dream sequences which the writer is writing, and they're
Mhm.
reacting to it, or do they have any sort of autonomy in there, or are they just like they can't go against whatever the writer wants them to do?
Yeah, so they can't go against whatever the writer wants them to do as long as the writer is conscious of what he's doing. But here's where the tattoo comes into play. Sometimes the writer sees things that he doesn't realize he's seeing, like a tattoo. And then his subconscious mind is working and writing things into the book, but he doesn't realize, for example, it might be connected to one of the people. And then they start to realize they do have some autonomy in the dreams whenever the writer is, maybe writing about something that is connected to them, but he doesn't realize it's connected to them. So that's where their power comes in. They can sort of
I
work on
see.
his subconscious in that way.
I see. Is this a
Yeah, what
standalone novel?
it is a standalone novel. I just had a review come up on Goodreads where someone was, "Oh, you should make this into a trilogy. This, you could go deeper, do so much more." So it definitely has enough loose ends where if I wanted to do something in the future, I could. But it also wraps up like this. It
I
wraps up as a
see.
standalone novel.
I see. So you don't currently plan because it seems like such a really wild premise. Um and like what would they do after they this book? Like that seems like there's a lot that you could do with that. Like
Yeah, there definitely is. It's I've always, as a writer, straddled those literary and fantasy worlds. So the other project that I'm working on right now is, very much an epic fantasy, and it's a
Oh, okay.
multiple
That's
series.
that's my playground.
There you go. Yeah. So I love that fantasy aspect. It's probably more where I've gotten comfortable as time has gone by. But, I love that I've created this sort of fantasy literary world where if I want to dip my toes into it again in the future, I can.
That's just wild. All right, so the writer is a god.
Yeah, I mean, in this world, he's a god. He's definitely not a god in the real world. So that's why he's sort of so evil because he gets so much pleasure out of, being a god in this dream world when he sits down to write.
So and so they're yeah. No, this is such a cool mind twist your mind a bit. It's yeah. I'm just I'm just stuck on that like that duality of are you real or are you just a dream, a dream in the writer's mind?
Yeah,
Because it seems to like play with that.
no, for sure. It's I think everybody, like, you as a writer and me as a writer, we would stay with these characters for so long and they become real. And, just that dynamic has always fascinated me, and then you have to make tough decisions with your characters. You sometimes they die, sometimes, you kill them off. And I was just trying to think of a way to put that in a real world concept and bring that more to life. And
Yeah, we all have our favorites that we're like that are on the never die list.
yeah, for sure. For
The
sure.
protected list. Um yeah, preaching to the choir. I've written 21 books and I have one character who's appeared in every single one.
Oh,
He's
wow.
not always the main it's this guy. He's not always the main character. He is
Uh-huh.
in many, many books. But yeah, my favorite characters are I'm sure that was obvious to anyone who's read my books. It's I yeah, my bias is quite obvious there. But yeah, I totally understand that. It's like you do get to know them, and the more books you write about them, the more you know about them, and
Yeah,
the harder
yeah.
it gets to make them do things that you need for plot reasons because you're like, all right, I need to justify why they would do this. I
Yeah,
know them
no,
too well. They're not going to want to do this. We got to figure out some interim steps that they might do that'll lead them down the path to the thing I want.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's, especially when you wanna keep them involved, like, you want them to play
Yeah.
a role.
Otherwise, it just doesn't work, and like the scene doesn't work, and you realize it doesn't work as a character wouldn't do that, and
Yeah,
you're
for
like,
sure.
damn, now I got to either change the plot or like find other ways to get them to the thing I need.
Yeah. I know that growing up, I think one thing that sometimes kept me away from fantasy was the stakes sometimes didn't seem as big. And, I'm thinking back to, I'm not like trying to slam Tolkien or anybody like that, but, you always knew the good guys were going to come through to the end. You knew that that was going to be the way, that everything was going to turn out okay.
I didn't know
And
that when I was first reading it. I was not sure that like this wasn't going to be one of those fantasy books where everything ended in fiery ruin because it just seemed so impossible. Like Sauron seemed so powerful, and there
yeah,
was so his armies were so vast, and the Nazgul were like frightening.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, how are they can't use this powerful artifact? They have no other powers except sneak, and all they can do is sneak around. And there's 9 of them. I mean, it's one person can hide, but 9, it's that gets a little bit dicey. And they don't, and they're arguing over the ring. Like I was not at all certain that they were going to all make it to the end, or that they were even going to succeed with the ring because it tempts you.
Yeah,
And I mean, even the purest of heart, like I mean, it's a long journey. They had to go, what is it, 2,000 miles or something? Like they basically had to go from New York to California with that thing. And like, that's a long way
yeah.
to be
No, for
fighting like
sure.
the temptation. So I did not know it was going to work out, especially when we got to Helm's Deep. I was like, oh man, are they going to survive this?
Yeah, I mean, there's not to say there's not like masterful tension in there, and beautiful, beautiful world building. I know for me, like I'm a huge Song of Ice and Fire fan, and
I couldn't get into that one.
I say what?
I read the first 50 pages when the first book came out, and I was like, and then the character, the point of view character died, and I was like, I don't have any reason to keep reading. Like we didn't meet any other characters. I don't know anybody else. The character who's that it was in died. Like I don't. he's dead. Like, that was a whole
Yeah.
story in itself. I don't have a
Yeah.
reason to turn the page, so I didn't. I gave the book away. I was like, okay, I'm done.
Oh, I
That was
so encourage you to
interesting.
go back. I mean, it's different, different strokes for different folks completely. For me, I know that it was the sense of the stakes was, so real, and it was just like it really hit home for me. And that's something I've tried to, get across in my own writing. I think there's definitely the sense of finding a balance with it. And, some people say that George R. R. Martin goes too far with that, and is too liberal with killing off his characters. But I do
He,
love how, like,
he's
you
deliberate.
genuinely don't know from page to page if somebody's going to die.
But that was his deliberate decision as an author when he started out, was that he wanted that shock
Yeah.
value. It was and it worked for him, because if you shock people, they might talk about you. Even if they hate it, they'll talk about it even more, and that'll make other people curious. So he was, I mean, that was genius for him. But like, I don't like books like that. So I don't want the shock value. I'd rather, like, people have that, like, reaction. They're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. That is so cool. Or that is so,
Yeah.
I'd rather that reaction than, like, to throw the book against the wall, get super, because people got like, I mean, I never went back and tried to read it. I didn't try watching it on HBO. I was just not interested in it at all.
Yeah.
The more I heard about it, the more I was like, yeah, I'm not interested. Not my kind of thing.
I will say in his defense, I feel like all of the deaths in his novel are earned. Like, there has been something set up that has shown the decisions that the characters have made, where they've put themselves in these positions. And, when you reread, it's like, these weren't circumstantial, thrown out of the wall. We're going to surprise you. They put themselves in a bad situation, and this is the end result of them doing that. So definitely one of the reasons why I'm a fan. But I mean, so many great fantasy authors now play with these tropes and in really interesting ways. I definitely, and I don't like it when characters, it's like you said, whenever you're drawn into the world or the life or a mind of a character, you don't want them just to be tossed away like they're nothing. If
Yeah.
they do die, you want it to be earned. You want to feel like, that was something that was a natural result of their journey.
I don't want them to kill the main character. Books where they kill off the main character and then continue the series after that, like, I don't, if you kill the only character I'm reading the series for, you don't expect me to buy the next one. I'm sorry. There are a number of series that I just stopped. They killed off the only character that I liked, and I was like, okay, I don't have any reason to
So
continue reading. I don't like the other characters, you
when
know,
you,
or they
so when,
vastly changed them.
which character did you? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Which
Yeah,
character
sure.
did he kill off early on that you thought was the main character that was dead?
In Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
I only read like 50 pages of the first book. So that I
Okay.
don't, it was like you come into the book and you're in the mind of like either a soldier or like like, it was something military. And that was the only reason that, like, I bought the book, because I love military fantasy. So I was like, oh, all right, this is some
Yeah.
kind of, and like, we were in the mind of some soldier at some ice wall, and this was kind of neat. And then he died. And I was like,
Oh,
we
okay.
didn't meet anybody. He didn't do anything. Yeah, the ice wall is kind of neat, but I've read it. No, I've read that similar trope in other places, so I don't need it again. And
Gotcha.
I
Okay, you're
we
talking about the prologue in the first book. I got you. Yeah,
yeah,
and then yeah. He writes so much. That's you barely ever see those guys again. But yeah,
yeah,
God,
but it's like, I need I didn't he didn't give me a reason to continue. Like, we didn't
yeah,
meet anybody, it if it had been from someone else's point of view, and that character lasted a while longer, I would have read more of the book, but I just had
yeah,
no reason to continue. And like, I was reading it on the train to New York City, so, like, on my way to the
yeah,
office, so somebody else wanted the book, and I was like, "Here, I'm bored with it now."
yeah. No,
I don't care what happens next, because I'm not invested in it. I like characters, and I need to be invested in the character, and, like, I'm not one of those. I know people who read for situations or for worlds, or who don't care about characters, but I'm not one of those people. Like, I need to open the book, meet a character, like the character, and then
yeah.
I want to root for them and follow their whole story.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. That was, I know that was the prologue of the book.
Yeah.
And then many people, whenever they talk about the beginning of that series, they actually they overlook that prologue because it doesn't seem like the start. Because in the very next scene of the first chapter is where you meet the Stark family, which is, all the kids, and sort of where the action picks up. And a lot of people don't, it's like it so blanks from their mind because it's almost like the book starts
Right.
after that. Yeah, that makes sense. So what are
I
some of your
didn't
other
I didn't know that, so I never turned the page. I was reading a physical book then, so like
Yeah,
I'm sitting on a Metro North train and it's jostling us around. I was like, yeah,
yeah.
not feeling it.
No,
So
I get it. What are your other favorite like fantasy writers? Who do you love?
Tracy and Margaret Weiss. I can't remember Tracy's last name. Don't come for me. I liked the Dragonlance books. I love the Deathgate cycle. Those 7 books are like I
Mhm.
loved them. I read some of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but I I found out later it's a puzzle and because like it just the first book was fantastic. I loved it. I got the second book. It was not like the first book, different characters. I didn't know where we were. I was very confused. I was like, this is like feels like a first book in another series.
Mhm.
And so I did read the end of that one. It was a good book, but I was like, I just wasn't feeling emotionally invested. The characters that I cared about in the first book, a few of them were in the second book, but like not the ones that I really, really liked. There were some side people who they were kind of annoying in the first book. They were kind of annoying in the second book, and I was like, I'm kind of done. I've heard later that like it's some big sprawling thing, and he did that on purpose, and it's a puzzle. And if you read Fire enough, you eventually figure it out. And I was like, I don't want to think that hard. I want to be entertained. I want fun characters.
Yeah.
I read the Lord of the Rings. I eventually did read the Silmarillion. I don't love the Silmarillion as much as I
Yeah.
like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. um, I do like the Baron and Luthien story in there, but I just lots of other stuff. I mean, I've read the Dresden Files. It's not epic fantasy. I checked out of that after I did read Ghost Story and a few of the ones after that, but he changed and it started out as a magical detective in Chicago, which I thought was awesome, and we just started drifting away from that and eventually like the later books have drifted too far from that and now
Uh-huh.
he's working for the Winter Court and his personality has changed and like all the side characters that I really liked have all had like personality lobotomies and have become like very strange. And so like I just I've not it's changed too much from what I liked into something that I don't like. So
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of all the Fae stuff. So and now it's like all heavy about that, and I just I don't particularly like that, and it's not doing
Yeah.
it in a way that's not. I've seen all this before, and I didn't like it, and like I'm not getting something new that I would like. And I'm sorry, to people who do like it, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
So checked out of that. Um, I I'm not a big fan of romance, but I liked the Kate Daniels series a lot.
Mhm.
I didn't read some of the offshoot stuff because it was very romancy and I can't stand Hugh D'Ambre, so did not
Uh-huh.
read those books. Um, and now there might be a new series with Caden Curran in Wilmington. I'm very excited about that. I read the first 2 and they were fun. I wish they were longer. There was a lot of summary, not so much scene. It was a lot of telling, um, which I noticed traditional books seem to do a lot of lately. But I wish there was more scene and they weren't. But I get it. They were meant to be novellas, and I just wish or shorter novels, and I just wish that they were like full books and with like there was a lot of things that they like summarized that I would have wanted to see.
Yeah.
Like just they summarized like conversations with other characters that like we would have seen if it was a full book.
Yeah.
And God, there's so many. I have over 1,000 audiobooks that are fantasy books.
Oh, wow.
I'm trying to remember all of them. Um, yeah, those are the top, but
Yeah.
like I've read like the Heralds of Valdemar. I read pretty far into that. I didn't like the owl ones, and I haven't really read anything after that. I haven't read Foundations or any of those. Don't throw me out of the Facebook group. um, and I read some of the Dragonlance. I just can't remember now. I've read like I've listened to so many. I could pull up my Audible account and read. Oh, that was weird. Our both of our like cameras had like
Yeah.
loading
Little
icon.
quick.
That was very strange because I have internet. It's not storming out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good here too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Yeah. I like action adventure fantasy. Not as much with the romantic stuff, but
Yeah. Yeah. I know my book has it's got the romantic element in it, but it's definitely, I feel like it's a sub theme of the story. You know, it definitely is like driven
Mhm.
by the tension and the adventure and things like that. But
See,
you know,
that's good. That
yeah,
that's that's I would like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the main. I've been influenced by, you know, I know, like, I started off sort of in the literary world. I've been writing
Mhm.
for 20, well, how long is it now? 22 years.
How many books
And
have you published?
how many books have I published? I published two literary novels back in the late 2000, like right around 2010, 2012. And then I took a little bit of I didn't take a break, but I really switched over the last 10 to 12 years of starting fantasy. So I published three fantasy novellas called The Deer King, and it's
Okay.
more of an epic fantasy little series in a colonial setting.
Oh,
That's probably, you know, that's the book that or this set of books I've gotten the most attention for. And then Many Savage Moons is the only other book that I finished in the fantasy world. You know, I've got other books that are, you know, sitting in my desk
don't
or
we
sitting in my
all?
computer files. Yeah, don't we all? That's for
I don't
sure.
I'm not
So,
gonna count those. There's too many on mine.
yeah, it's, you know, sometimes you go down a path and you get way down it and you're like, ah, but
The characters do something, you're like, "Wait, that wasn't on the outline," and I
yeah.
don't where the hell are you guys going? And wait.
I know my wife warns me with series, especially. I feel like I'm more of a gardener than an architect, but then I
Mhm.
have this big epic scope. But then sometimes, you know, the gardening can get me in a little bit of trouble. I've tried to really tighten that up with my last few projects. Like, really, I definitely don't go as full outliney as some people do, but I try to plan a lot more, you know, and have a much deeper sense of where I'm heading. But it's tough. You know, I like the discovery along the way. I know the book I'm writing
Yeah, me
right
too.
now, I got to chapter 5 and I'm having a hard time, you know, like something else has happened, like something organic happened. And then it's like, okay, you know, where do you go with this? And
Oh, my current whip went off the rails in chapter 1, and they haven't looked back. They they have set the outline on fire, and they're just, you know,
yeah, they've got
we're
their own
very
needs and
far.
wants. Yeah.
Yeah. They keep promising they'll get to what I need them the whole point of this book, but I don't think they're gonna get there in this book. I think there's gonna have to be a sequel. They're about 2,000 miles away from it.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, no, I definitely have some of the same issues. I find that to be a fascinating dichotomy, though, between like the people who outline so much and the people who don't. And, you know, where authors end up with that. You know, to me, like Patrick Rothfuss is definitely a gardener, like, you know, but he's
He's
very
lost in the weeds right now. I've given
involved.
up all hope that there's ever going to be a third book. I've read the King Killer Chronicles like as
Uh-huh.
the first book right after it came out. I liked it. I didn't like the second one as much. The frame
Mhm.
story was much more interesting and we got very little of it. I was not interested in his it was this emo kid wandering around, going to magic school, having magic lessons, getting into trouble for like not using his brain and like just being dumb. Like he made a lot of dumb decisions and like yeah. I
Yeah,
don't I didn't read the novella, the what is it? The slow something
uh,
of slow
slow
regard
regard
of
of
something.
silent things, the slow regard of
Something like that. I was like,
yeah.
book 2 was didn't do it for me. I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge King Killer Chronicles fan. You know, you know, when you see sort of I was so surprised with the second book, he went off in all these different directions.
Yeah, it was
It
very disconnected, the disjointed, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was in some ways, you know, the plot definitely was sort of all over the place, and it didn't feel like he was working towards a conclusion of a trilogy, which really surprised me. But the writing is so genius. I mean, and the character work is so genius. Like, I give a lot of leeway to writers with that ability, and you know, I
But it wasn't satisfying though. It was like eating a bag of chips for dinner. It was good, the chips, but you're not satisfied.
say I was. I mean, I really, really was. Like, when
I
someone
wasn't. I don't know. I needed the plot to do. I needed there to be more connection. It was too all over the place. Like
yeah,
throughout most of the book, I was like, "Where are we going?" Like there didn't seem to be a point to any of it, and I spent some of the book kind of bored. Like, yeah, the language is pretty and all that, and the characters are nicely drawn, but if they're not doing something interesting and not moving towards something, it's kind of not fun for the reader. It's not
yeah,
fun for me, anyways.
yeah. I mean, I felt that he was moving towards something. I felt like within the plot structure of the book, he was working toward the goals of the book. They did not match up with the plot goals of the series and where I thought, the first book was headed once we got into the second book. But, I've got for that sort of writing, like I give a lot of leeway. I felt like there's just
I
genius on
don't.
the page after page.
I don't, because the first book was so much tighter. I was
Yeah.
not expecting the second book. It felt like it needed to be edited, that it was not edited enough. I had the same problem with the Wheel of Time. I
Hmm.
I liked the first four books, although I felt that they needed more editing. That
Hmm.
there was stuff that really could have just been cut out or like left out just to get to the point. They were more of a travel log than a fantasy book. But I did enjoy the a lot of the things that were in there and how it wrapped up after the fourth book. Did not enjoy books 5, 6, 7, or 8, and I checked out of the series and am never ever going back because I am never ever going to reread those books again. Books 5 through 8. I would reread the first four. I did like those.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never read Wheel of Time actually. That's one that, I've thought about dipping my toes into, but it always seemed overwhelming to me, just and I don't feel that initial pull towards it. Are you a Sanderson fan? Do you
I have read just his Reckoners. That's the superhero ones. I didn't.
Okay.
That was the ones that I heard about. So I read Steelheart, and I forgot the name of the second one. I really liked Steelheart. I got the
Okay.
second book. That was good. It was good. It didn't quite end, um, kind of where I was hoping it would. It was still a good book, good ending, but I think I should have stopped there. The third book, they spent a lot of the book sitting around trying to figure out what to do in the
Yeah.
book. I was like, could we like a chapter or two of that? Okay, they got a plan, but most of the book was that, and then like the way they ended up defeating this thing. It was kind of like that Hulk movie where Hulk has to defeat the Cloud. It was kind of like that. It was not a very satisfying ending. It was not very. I am a huge superhero fan, so
Mhm.
I needed that block. I wanted like the Avengers kind of thing where it wraps up in like some cool team thing, and I didn't get that. So I heard about his other books, but because I was disappointed with that one, like I never gave them a try.
Yeah.
So maybe someday I will. I've heard good things about them, but I don't know.
Yeah. I
We'll
mean,
see.
I know the reason I brought him up is I've read the first book in the Stormlight Archives, The Way of Kings, and I've read about 100, 200 pages into the second one. And you can definitely see like the plotting and you can see the planning. Like it's so much more
Yeah.
evident sometimes in like a Martin novel or a Rothfuss novel. But like Sanderson doesn't do it for me the way that like the King Killer Chronicles and the Song of Ice and Fire too. And it's, and I watch videos where people love Sanderson and I really respect Sanderson. Like I read his books and I see what he's doing and he's a master at what he's doing. It's just always interesting to me, like what attracts different readers, and that doesn't attract me as much. I can read it, enjoy it, and appreciate it, but like I don't feel this overwhelming desire. And I know this would make me anathema to so many Sanderson fans out there, but like I just don't feel that desire to like keep going with the series. And it's just interesting to me. The
I'll have to try it and see. I might like it then. Because I did not like Ice and Fire, and I did not like the second King Killer book. They wanted more from it than I got.
well,
I left
my
that
book,
one very disappointed.
yeah. Well, my book, Many Savage Moons, has a very clear plot line all the way through. So I will say
I mean, like,
that.
I give some leeway, it's like I totally get it. Like you plan and your characters throw a spanner in that plan.
Yeah.
So like, organic stuff happening, as long as it seems like we're headed somewhere, like I'm good. I don't need a map. Like as long as it seems like we're heading towards something, I am or the characters are trying to work towards something, they're not just sitting around like talking about that we need a plan and not really doing anything else,
Yeah,
then I'm fine with that. As long as the characters think that they are headed in the right direction, even if what they're doing doesn't actually get them there, like, and they don't figure it out for a while, like, I'm okay with that because people do that in real life too. Like, we think that this will get us from point A to point B, and sometimes it doesn't.
yeah,
That's
no, for
life.
sure. Yeah, writing this book was really a different experience for me. It is the only book that I've ever written where I set it aside for a long period of time. So I had the idea for the
Mhm.
first part, which was sort of the date part where Winter and Nathaniel meet and she's being harassed by this writer and everything goes bad. So I wrote that and then I didn't know what to do with it. And every other time in the past with all my other books, I've always
Yeah.
like, kind of known or like went with it. So I just like set it aside. And for a while, I thought I was never going to finish it. And then it just slowly came to me. And it was just, it was a unique experience because that's not normally how I write as a writer. And so I think it was like 5 or 6 years from beginning of writing the book to the end, but there was about a 2.5 year break there where I really just didn't do anything in it. But then
Oh,
it
that's
started
cool.
coming and I was like, oh, I know where I'm going with this. Okay. And then it
So the
became organic.
characters sat down and figured out where things should go,
Yeah,
and then
they,
sent you a memo.
they did. They're
Sometimes they
working in
do
my
that
subconscious. Yeah, it was nice of
because you
them.
are
I'm
the
glad it
writer.
took them long enough. But
You're the true god of their world.
yeah, I'm a very faulty God, I'll tell you that.
They were going over the other writer god's head to the actual god of the world. That's very meta.
Yeah, there's a
I love
lot of
that. That's
meta
so
in that
meta.
book. Oh,
So they
man.
they have a lot of power because they can go straight to you to override the other god.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. They were like, "Nothing's ever gonna get here done here unless we, take it into
that
our
could
own hands."
that could be a fun you know, second book or something, is that the writer is actually a story that another writer is writing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
And the
that's true.
characters find some way to contact that other writer. That could be like, then you could like insert yourself. I think it like lends itself to
It
that.
really does, it really does.
You could get pretty meta with that. And I put the idea out there. You might have to do that. That could be a lot of fun.
I'm taking notes in the back of my mind, so
Yeah, like I could see how like that could be like, I have this ridiculous Portal Fantasy thing where like there's this long running, it's canon that I don't run the newsletter, the characters do, so it's from
Uh-huh.
their point of view of the newsletters. So and sometimes they go on adventures in the newsletter because they're characters, and what else are they going to do? So
Yeah.
um and I collected some of that together and put it into like a novel, and I was like, wait, if it's just going to be an actual novel, we have to actually show them coming to my apartment using my computer. And that led to all kinds of things. Well, like, what happens if like my neighbor knocks on the door and like, what if
Yeah.
the dragon in their world finds that portal and comes? What happens? So then we had this, there was some ridiculous like book where like they're in my apartment and the dragon comes and they're fighting a dragon in the middle of my apartment building. And then, some, and then if I am the god of their world because I am their scribe and I write down what they do, but like, are there other versions of me? And so we had other versions of me, and I got kidnapped by an evil version of myself from another Earth. And like, it's I have to finish that. It was just the series. It's kind of ridiculous, but you could
Yeah.
do stuff like that too because you can just kind of keep going with it.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. I love broad scope ideas like that. Like, that always intrigues me whenever I'm hearing about a project. I know I've done that with my, epic fantasy project. Like, I've got the primary books taking place in, I guess, the most present time, but then I've written short stories from, like, settings in the past that add on to or give a little bit more context to the present book.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love that
Yeah,
sort of stuff.
no, that can be a lot of fun. All right,
Yeah.
so hopefully you'll come back in the future and tell us that you have written another,
Yeah,
more books about this and have taken this idea in different directions, because I think it could be like pretty cool,
yeah,
um, and see how things develop for Winter and Nathaniel,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
because maybe at some point they could be the god,
Yeah, yeah. You never know.
and they could make the writer do what they want. Get some revenge. That could be kind of fun. You could there yeah, now my brain is spinning. There's so many, like, cool ways you could go with this. So I hope you do, like, continue with it at some point in the future.
Oh, well,
Just to
thanks. Yeah. It's definitely something to think about. It's I know you know this. It's fun to watch a book grow when you start to get, a lot of organic reactions, and it starts to make its way out there in the world. It can be tough, but it's neat to see the reactions that you get.
Yeah, no, and for listeners out there, like even like I know this is a tough financial time, but like one of the best things you can do for your favorite authors is talk about their books on social media, write a review, even if all you say is that you really enjoyed this book and this Nathaniel or Winter is your favorite character, like that, like even that can really help an author out, so you know, because I know it's really tough right now and people are not able to buy as many books as they would like. So, like, those are all ways that you can help out an author
Yeah.
and they don't
No, for
cost
sure.
anything.
Yeah, it means the world whenever you look up
It does.
your Goodreads and you see like a new, review and somebody's like loving your book that you've never met. That means everything.
No, it really does. So I just wanted to put that reminder out there. And many authors or books are available in libraries. I think you're in Kindle Unlimited. Uh,
Yeah,
this Many Savage Moons. So and either way, like we, they're both good ways to enjoy books. So those are some lower cost options out there.
for sure.
So yeah, and if you have Kobo Plus, well, Many Savage Moons isn't in there, but my books are all in Kobo Plus. So so you can read them, without paying extra, and yeah, those are all low cost ways of helping your favorite author out. So I
For
just want to
sure.
put that out there. And you're in Spiffbo. I've seen your book.
Yes, yes. I am in
Who's
SPIFFO this year.
who's
It's been a
cohort are you?
really interesting ordeal. I didn't, I had followed SPIFFO at sort of a remove for a few years, but I wasn't as intimately familiar with it
Mhm.
as I probably should have been. And then I was blown away, by the social media sort of industry around it once the contest kicked into gear. I was like, oh, I knew that it was big. I didn't realize that especially on social media, I didn't realize it was as big as it was. So that's been really neat. And I've definitely come across some really cool books out there. Just a lot of really talented independent writers out there, and it's been neat to talk with some of them and get to look at their books.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of talent out there. Whose cohort are you in?
I am in the Weather Wax Report.
Okay.
So
Are
yeah,
you one of the 275 books that are still in?
yes, I
It's
don't.
gotten too hard to follow, like, who's in, who's out. I just checked to see if my book has been mentioned.
I, I don't think that I don't think that Esme has made. I know she's picked one semifinalist so far, but then I think she's had some things going on, so she's taking a little break. But I think she's maybe next week going to start doing more cuts again. But just all power to these bloggers. They're putting so much of their time and effort, and promoting independent authors. I just think the world of it. You always know as an author. Like I've had enough people read my books, and I've written for long enough. Some people are going to love it and some people aren't. Like that's just
Yeah.
the way that it's going to be. So, I certainly hope that she loves my book, but if she doesn't, I completely understand, and more power to the one she's picked, because I know there will be super, super talented people who deserve to go on.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a trip. Definitely. Well, the guy behind me, Chris Breaker, Enchanted, is in Spiffbo this year.
Oh,
That's the
cool.
self-published fantasy blog of number 9. Yeah, I only heard about it like last year, like right before it like right after it closed, like, and I didn't quite know what it was. And like I've seen stuff like I've seen mentions of it in the past, but like I didn't know what it was. It was only like last year that an author I knew like put their book in, and I mentioned it and asked them, I was like, well, what is this? And then they told me and I looked into it and I was like, oh, okay. Maybe I
Yeah.
want to do this. So then I decided to put it in. So
Whose
um
cohort are you in?
Philip Chase.
Okay.
Have
Yeah.
not heard anything yet.
Yeah.
So
Just being
I
patient and waiting. Yes.
yeah, just patiently waiting. But I think I heard that he reads all of them and then makes a decision. So that's 30 books. So it
Yeah,
might be a while to
that's a
hear
lot.
anything. Yeah, I mean, I hope he likes my book, but I've got some stiff competition.
Yeah, yeah. It's all, it's definitely reader specific. That is,
Yes. Yeah, and my
that
book
is
is
for sure.
definitely one of those books you either love it or you hate it. Like
Yeah,
there's not a whole lot of middle ground because I play with some of the most popular tropes. They're not the way you're used to seeing them. So it's
yeah.
insta like or insta no. I know some people don't want their hero to have a family or a 4-year-old child who's trying to tag along and be his sidekick.
Yeah.
There's not exactly childcare in fantasy world, so sometimes he's stuck trying to like investigate things or deal with magical problems with Junior tagging
Yeah.
along. So yeah, Junior's very excited about that too. So
Oh, that's cool. I mean, that's a different, that's neat. I mean, very realistic. I would,
it's like I'd never seen that before, and like I was reading, I don't remember which fantasy series where like the hero like did actually have a family, but he left them to go do. And I was like, well, what if the magical mayhem came to you in your
yeah,
town if you didn't have to leave? What would you do? And you don't have wifey. It's you and Junior and your brother who's a teenager,
yeah.
and little boy. What do you do? How do you deal with the monsters, the ancient evil, the how do you deal with that when you have a teenage brother and a 4-year-old son and you don't have reliable childcare? He can shield, so we gave him that 1 plus. But he's also got a fantasy version of epilepsy.
Oh, wow.
And I wanted my sister passed away in 2014 from complications of diabetes, and I couldn't find a way to put that into a fantasy world. Like we don't have needles, we're not making insulin, so I was like, okay, diabetes is out. We need something else that he could have that doesn't need some kind of external medication or
Hmm.
so I settled on epilepsy. And that so he's sort of like neurodivergent, I guess. I didn't
Hmm.
realize epilepsy was part of that, but yeah, so he's got his own sort of issue because he's very powerful, and he's also got Junior to look after, so
Yeah.
and keep out of trouble.
Yeah. Oh, that's a fascinating dynamic.
Yeah, and it was it was it was it was a tough book to write because I wanted one thing and the characters immediately were like, no, we're going to go this way with the story. So a lot of
Yeah.
tug of war with that. And they went off and did something else in the middle of the book, another adventure. And then eventually I got them to come back and solve the problem that they were supposed to be solving from the first chapter. So that's why I don't know if he's going to like it because I and I couldn't split the book because we started with the one problem and then they went off and did something else.
Hmm.
And then he went back and dealt with it with
Yeah.
the original problem, and I was like, I can't really split them because he didn't actually solve the first problem.
Yeah, it's, and like we said before, it's all always going to be reader specific. I've It's blown my mind with the people that have read my stuff. Some people can love the very thing that other people hate, like,
Yeah.
and that's, so it's just, you know you you definitely want certain readers to like your book. But I know I have a friend that I respect who's he writes, and he had read Many Savage Moons and he loved it, but he didn't like The Deer King, which is my other novel, and it's just what people are drawn to a lot of
Mhm.
times, and to me, they were both worlds that, I know as a writer, whenever I'm writing, the only thing that I can really control is what am I interested in reading. So I try
Mhm.
to write like what would draw me in. And that's sort of what I judge my books by as I reread it, is like, is this something that would genuinely draw me in? And I feel like I have enough sense of my own style, and I'm well read enough where I feel like if it compels me, it's good, at least for a certain subset of readers. But
Right, right,
yeah.
right. Mine, according to reviewers, is very advanced Dungeons and Dragons. There's
Hmm.
a lot with lore, some similarities with Lord of the Rings. Not obviously, it's not written in it's written in modern English, not yeah, not the not the way that the Lord of the Rings is. It's a much more approachable novel.
Yeah. That's
There's
cool though. Sounds like it's got a little style then. If it's if you're comparing it, I guess not to Old English, but yeah, just a little bit of
it's
that.
it's more like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in the way it's like the way their stories are. It's
Hmm.
more like that. Like it's very like it's third person deep. You're in Sauron's head for good or for evil. He's a
Yeah.
nice guy, so he's not very talkative though. So
Yeah.
there's a
You're
lot
right.
of
That.
characters talking to him and him just like not responding because he doesn't feel like answering them. Or it's like if I don't say anything, then I won't get. Then I can't get into trouble. So I'm just gonna not say anything. And especially with like his son will ask him a bazillion questions of magic, and he'll just not answer at all. He's just like, I don't want to talk about this. So there is that. He's not a very talkative character.
Yeah.
He gets better over time, but in the beginning, he's very closed off and
Yeah. It's probably yeah. Personality quirk. There you go.
yeah. So some people like very introverted characters, and some people don't. He is a big introvert. His son is a big extrovert. So it's
Oh,
so
that's cool.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of scenes where Junior's like, like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Why are you not talking to me? I don't like it when you get quiet like that. There's that fun dynamic.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, you either like it or you don't. It's very like yeah. But I
Yeah.
think it's like that with all books though. I'm not I mean maybe there are some books that where there's middle ground. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And you said you do like close third person point of
Mhm.
view?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's usually what I write in. So
It's just fun because then you only know what the character whoever's character your head you're in, you only know what they know. If they
yeah.
don't know what's going on, then neither do you. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but you can go to another character's head who does know what's going on and maybe doesn't realize that character B doesn't know what's going on. You have this sort of fun dynamic where like sometimes they think that character knows what's going on, so they don't like talk about it with them. And the other character has no clue and and because they don't know something is going on, they obviously don't ask about it. And you can have some really fun dynamics like that.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, that's I know my fantasy series has three different point of views. They're all close third person. So you can learn something in one other person's point of view that the other one didn't get across.
Yeah. Usually Sar knows what's going on and other characters don't. He doesn't want to tell them. he
Yeah.
doesn't want he doesn't want to get in trouble because he works for certain people and he doesn't like want them to know what he's involved in.
Uh-huh.
But he can't lie. So there's a lot of like telling only parts of the truth and
Hmm.
like hoping they don't like put two and two together and get four.
Yeah.
And
Oh
they know
man.
he does that, so it can get kind of they end up turning into an interrogation because they know he's only telling them half the truth. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of fun things like that.
Very cool.
Yeah, no, I love the Chris Baker series. Chris Baker Enchant is the first book of the Chris Baker series. There's now 10
Okay.
books in it. There's a couple of prequels. There's some offshoots. There's yeah, there's a lot. I
Yeah.
have 21 books in the same world that he shows up in all of them. So
Oh wow. That's
somewhere he's
that's
there, even if it's at the end. Even if he's not supposed to be in the book and there's nowhere in the outline that mentions him, he finds a way to show up somehow. I don't know how he's done that.
Oh man.
It's like, where's Waldo? You're like, all right, where is he? He's going to show up somewhere because he always shows up. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. No, this has been fantastic. Is there
Yeah, thank you
anything?
so much.
Yeah, is there anything else you want to say about Many Savage Moons?
No, I hope people out there will give it a shot. I'll show the cover one more time. Yeah, that's what I will say. One thing, the
Sure.
cover is by my good friend Doyle Hinkle. I know a lot of people in Spiffbo really seem to react strongly to the cover. I know it made the semifinals of my cohort, but didn't go on to the finals. But Doyle Hinkle, an amazing graphic designer. Just wanted to give him a shout out, and I love the cover. I'm a big fan.
So that is that like meant to be an Egyptian eye? Because like it's kind of like the Eye of Horus, but
Yeah, it does kind of look like that. I don't know. I haven't asked him. I do think though it gives it a unique sort of feel and
mhm.
draws in. And I love he's got the moons in the four corners.
Yeah,
Yeah, the half moon, the full moon, the waning
and
and the
the
waxing moons. But
what is that called? The border is really pretty.
yeah, yeah. He did a great job with that. So
No, it's a very cool book cover. So
yeah.
I saw it in the Spiffo thing, and I was like, "That's a cool cover."
Yeah, I know there was a lot of controversy with the cover contest this year, but
Yeah, I don't understand it. Like, who cares how the cover was made? It's if it's a pretty cover, and the whole point of a cover is to get is what how the reader reacts to it. Like, who cares what the cover was made in? Like, if it was drawn in crayon on a napkin, or if it was illustrated in Photoshop. Like, who like I didn't understand the whole controversy, because the whole point of a cover is, did somebody click buy because they, or click to read the blurb because they liked the cover? Like, that's his whole job, is to get people interested. Like, I
yeah,
didn't understand that whole thing.
I think the thing was they wanted to reward, like cover designers. So they didn't want to reward someone who had just used an AI cover. So, because I know they had the box for like click AI if it was designed by AI. I know it was the Bob the Magician. I think that was the one with the issues. I think what happened, I didn't follow it as closely as a lot of people, was it was like half and half. He had used some AI elements the cover designer had, and he
But who
hadn't been
cares?
forthright
That's
with
like,
that.
I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
that's like using like stock images. Like, everybody uses, like, well, my cover does not use stock image. That he's a custom 3D character that I created in Daz, and gave to the designer, and she painted him and did the
Yeah,
backgrounds. But this was back in like 2016, when like that was really your only option if you
yeah.
wanted, there wasn't much on stock sites. So I had to learn, how to do that, because there was a specific look that I wanted, and I couldn't get it. I couldn't seem to describe it in a way that like anybody could understand what I wanted. So I was like, damn it, I'm going to get the software. I'm going to make the character. I'm going to give it to somebody, and then we will go from there. And,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I I mean, I definitely can understand where they're coming from. Like, I do fear with AI, like it'll cut into people paying artists for their work. And so I think that in the long run, that's a danger that, even, fiction writers we're going to have to deal with as time goes on. And
I don't think so. Like, for
yeah,
some artists, I think it could be an issue, like if they're charging like very high fees, like a lot. But there's a lot of authors who were making their own covers before. Like I was doing the character design in a 3D program and giving it to somebody, and for a long time, and then after a while, like, financially I couldn't do that anymore, and I was like, well, I'm already creating the character. Maybe I can learn to do the rest of it
yeah,
myself.
yeah,
Because the character is the heart of the cover, and I was creating that, and spending hours to create that, and giving that to a designer to help me finalize the concept.
yeah,
So, I don't know. I just so like I know people who do use, AI art, but they weren't paying designers before that. They were doing it
yeah.
themselves.
No,
So
I think
now
it's
they have a better quality of cover. I don't know of anybody who was paying a designer who then stopped paying a designer and started doing it with AI. I've only heard from of people who weren't paying anybody to do it, who were started doing using the AI art. And I do know art designers who are incorporating AI elements for things that they can't get stock image for. Because for
yeah,
fantasy, like, AI art is amazing because you can generate stuff that you can't find on stock sites.
yeah,
So I have a different view on it. Like, I mean, maybe it will hurt some design. I don't know. I know a lot of authors were not paying for designers to begin
yeah.
with, so
I
because they
think with
can't
the
afford it.
I mean, I think that people are definitely gonna have different opinions on that. I'm
Yeah.
pretty anti AI, but I mean, I don't care. Like, if someone like uses AI for their art, that's fine. I think for the contest, it was a problem because they were supposed to be forthright about it,
Yeah.
and that was definitely an issue for the. And I did see his new cover, which I thought was really cool, because he did get his cover replaced after that. But it was pretty neat. Bob the Magician.
No, that's cool. I mean,
Yeah,
if you got a cooler cover out of it, that's cool.
yeah,
Yeah, I know. I remember seeing the boxes. I didn't understand like why that was a thing, but this was not Chris Baker and Janda was not created with any sort of AI imagery. It didn't exist then, so
Yeah.
there was no AI imagery to use then.
Yeah.
Just DAZ 3D and Photoshop, and
I'm impressed if you put
um,
that together. That is that's where my artistic skills go out the window because I cannot put together any sort of like artistic design.
well, I just did, like I said, adjusted the character, and I wanted that him staring at you with the hand up and the magic coming out. I didn't do the magic; that was drawn. The what I generated was definitely him, his face, the clothes, and him in that pose with the hand up. But everything else, like the designer added, like the highlights and painted the hair a little bit better than what was generated. And just like and added the magic on the hand and the background because there was no background.
Yeah.
It was like, I want the character. I have legitimately no clue what should be behind him. I leave that to somebody who actually can design. But yeah, like I don't know. I'm very interested in AI art because like it's so hard sometimes to explain to a designer what you want, and like
Hmm.
being able to generate something and be like, look, this is what I want, something like this, but prettier. I think that can be like a really big help when you're approaching a cover. Because it can be really difficult to explain because we're not artists,
Yeah.
and we're
No.
not going to use the right terminology. And you can end up with a lot of I've gone back and forth with some very patient designers in the past because we were using the same words but meaning different things, and all I'm seeing in design is not what I asked for. And
Yeah.
eventually we realized that we were using the same terms to mean different things, and when we eventually got on the same page, because you can't get on a phone with a lot of these designers, it's everything is email or like chat
Yeah.
through Facebook, and some of it is not in real time because of time zones and things, which I totally understand. It's like you can have like misunderstandings that span like days or weeks, which can be challenging. So
Yeah.
I do think that there are benefits of AI art because you can get something and be like this, but prettier or better, or this is where my brain is at. And the designer can be like, oh, okay, now I see what your vision is. I can do something. I can do something that looks kind of like this, but better.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
feel like that could be sort of a help because that's always been a struggle. And I know other people who struggle with that too because we're not artists, so we're not going to use the right words. you know, we're good at writing words for stories, but not quite for covers. And sometimes we don't even know like what a good cover should look like. So,
Yeah. No, I definitely don't know I know what a good cover is whenever I see it, but I know I couldn't bring it into
but yeah,
fruition.
you have to see
Yeah.
it first. But if you're looking at a blank canvas or you have this book and it doesn't have a cover and you're like, and the artist's like, well, what do you want on it? And you're like, I don't know. That's always been my go-to answer. I don't know what should be on there. You tell me, and then we'll go from there. And they're like, no, that's not how it works. And I'm like, oh, great. Oh, Lord help me. But in terms of like AI text generators, like eventually, like they'll be able. I don't think we have to worry about anything with that. I mean, yes, there will be spammers and there will be people who generate full books with AI, but like there were book stuffers and people stealing other books. Like I really don't think authors have a whole lot to worry about because all of the stuff that they're worried about with AI has been going on for the last 20 years before there even was AI. People were just doing it differently, and they're going to keep doing that. Amazon and other stores are just going to have to keep finding ways to find these people who are creating the bad books. And like customers are, if they have a bad experience with something, they're going to return it, they're going to complain. I really don't think we have a lot to worry about, honestly. But I
Yeah.
do think the tools are great for people who have impairments in any way. Like if you have wrist issues, like now you can dictate, and instead of like getting gobbledygook from like Dragon or like just dictating on your phone, you could put that into like ChatGPT and ask it to help you clean it up, and which I think is amazing because the whole point of using these dictation things is because you can't, you have wrist issues or hand issues, or you're not able to be typing it out, and having an AI assistant able to help you clean it up so that you're reducing the burden on your physical health. I think that's amazing. And like there's a
Yeah.
lot of applications with that. People who have ADHD and other neurodivergent mindsets. I'm not using the right word there. Don't come for me. Who are also who maybe their brains think differently can use AIs to help them brainstorm, help them get past any sort of blocks and things. So like I think the power of AI, yes, it can be used for evil. I think the good right now at least outweighs the bad. But I've just seen so many inspiring stories of people who haven't been able to write for years because of wrist pain or injury or cognitive, maybe they have a traumatic brain injury, or they're dealing with long COVID and the brain fog, and just having this neutral third party on a chat. Yeah, they're not human, but who cares? Who else is going to listen to us talk about our stories for like 8 hours on end without running away screaming and tearing their hair out, And I just find those stories so inspiring.
Yeah, I definitely take a much darker view of AI. I think that we're heading in a really bad direction with it, and I think that I worry sometimes that like we're outsourcing, the thing that I fell in love with, which is the craft of writing, like the actual act of creation itself. I understand, like, I don't mean to get too dogmatic or too
Mm,
preachy about it because, for example, like I've used vulgar lang. I don't know if you're familiar with vulgar lang. It
no, I
creates
never heard of it.
like fake languages on so like even I've used stuff like that, to some degree. I do worry that it's a slippery slope that before we know it, we could lose touch with the very process of creating and some of the depth and the time and the effort that needs to go into that. But I know people have very different takes on it.
I mean, there's like as they say in the group 20 books to 50K, there's always up the mountain, and for some people, if that means generating most of their words and trying to get the AI to sound like them, like it's always up the mountain. We all have different goals as authors. Like I love the writing part of it. I'm fine with having an AI help me like brainstorm my characters, like wander off the plot into like plot holes, and I'm like, how do I get them out of this? Like I spent a whole year trying to get them out of trouble in one book, and I never want to do that again. And if I can go back and forth with an AI for an hour and find a way to get them some creative solution to their problem so the book doesn't have to wait a year, I think that's better for readers. So like I don't know. I have a much more positive view. Yes, there's going to be bad actors who are going to use it in bad ways, but they were doing that even before there was AI. So, I mean, and I'm always polite and kind to our AI overlords. So if Skynet ever takes over, like I'd like to be favored human status here.
No, I'm gonna be first on the kill list. I'll have said
I'm trying to
too many
keep
bad
the
things.
robots happy.
Yeah,
So,
the robots aren't going to like me. It's okay. Thank you so much for having me
oh,
on here
you're
today. I
welcome.
appreciate
We've
it. That was a
wandered.
great conversation, and
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for doing this for authors.
Yeah, we wandered way into the weeds. We got into the eternal optimist and pessimist um, viewpoints. But thank you so much for coming. This was fun. I didn't expect us to talk about AIs, but I never know where the interviews are going to go. So,
Yeah, that's right. That's what makes them interesting. So,
yeah. So, thank you so much. And hopefully, you'll be back to talk about another book another time. You're always welcome.
thank you. Yeah, I'll
You're
definitely love to come
welcome.
back on in the future.
Yeah, I know. And yeah, and I'll have all the links in the description of the show notes, depending on where you're watching or listening. Again, I am Melinda Kucsera, your indie fantasy author. We've been talking to Ben Spencer about many Savage Moons and many other topics. And that's going to do it for this episode of Fantasy Lore and More. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day or a great night, depending on where you are.